Okay, so the title of Dr. Sarah Nicole Johnson's presentation is Preserving the Ordinary Lives of Extraordinary People, which I think is an amazing title. Dr. Sarah Johnson believes that descendants, the community, must take an active role in shaping the narrative about the Seminole Negro Indian Scouts, Seminole Negroes, and Muskoge's community and their contributions to the U.S. She founded the Seminole Negro Indian Scouts Historical Society to preserve, analyze, and disseminate the accurate histories by collecting and curating oral history and community knowledge about our culture and history, cultivating and generating new knowledge about the Scouts' unique role in U.S. history through combining an oral history perspective and primary sources such as official documents and all available contemporary accounts, developing an online information resource for descendants and the general public. Dr. Johnson has a BA from the University of Rhode Island and a PhD in international relations from the American University. Her research on the community is grounded in her research on internally displaced people and based on oral history, primary documents, and information provided by external researchers. All right, Nikki, take it away.
All right. So everything Wendy just said basically means I am insanely curious about everything. And so I'm excited to see so many of you online as well, because you must also share the same kind of curiosity that I have as well. So one, this is going to be interactive for better or for worse. Obviously, if you don't want to go on camera or say anything, that's fine. I'm not going to try to embarrass anybody. But I do encourage you to use that chat box function, since this is being recorded and we might not get to discuss everything you'd like to. You can at least have the chat as a record, and you can follow up with this stuff later on. I have a couple of questions. So I don't know if people can turn their cameras on or not, or use your little icon reaction at the bottom. How many of you know who your grandparents are?
I do.
Okay. I'm going to guess that most of us do.
Yes,
How many
did.
of you know who your great-grandparents are?
And I have pictures of them.
That works, close enough?
I do.
Anyone else, great-grandparents? Who knows there? How about your great-great-great-grandparents?
Yes, I do.
All right, let's go back 4 generations. So your great-great-great-great-grandparents.
Mm-hmm.
So for a lot of us who are on the line who are descendants, you should be able to. We are able to trace ourselves back to either fourth or fifth generations. Someone wrote nope, but by the end of this, you just might, Jared. And a lot of those of us who can trace our grandparents back that far, a lot of it's been based on oral history that we've learned about or heard, or even written documents as well. And so part of what I want to talk about tonight is how I do my research, and why we all need to do research, and to share some ideas. So number one, we often talk about, and again, let me just give another caveat. It is great to have so many people on the line. A lot of what I'm directing my comments towards are descendants. And that is because we talk a lot about wanting to have our own narrative and wanting to create, preserve our own history. So we need to do the work. And so for us to sit back and let other people do that work and create that story for us, I feel like that's shame on us, because what we know from how we've been raised and what we know from other descendants is invaluable. And it is something that can't always be captured by other people. And I think the more we don't start to record our own history, we're also really robbing our future. So a lot of what I want to talk about is like, how do we try to start bridging that gap? Just in terms of like my own research, and so you'll get an idea in terms of like how I approach this. My research is with internally displaced people and refugees. So I've always been interested in what happens to people who are forced to leave where they're from. And when you look back at our history, right, we were forced to leave a number of places. So we know that some of us came out of the Carolinas. Some of us came from different parts of Africa. Some of us came from Mexico. Some of us came from all over the place. But for focusing on just the folks who are from Florida, we had to leave for various reasons. Yes, there might have been accords or agreements about what would happen when we got to a new place, but we still left. We were still leaving a war-torn situation. We were facing a violation of human rights, and we were actually facing a deprivation of a basic means of supporting ourselves, right? So when you're an internally displaced person, you're forced to move from where you are to go somewhere else, but you never leave the confines of your location. So for us, that meant that we stayed within the state borders from the time we left Mexico all the way until we reached Texas. Once we reached Texas and we crossed over into Mexico, some people might consider us to be refugees because we fled some kind of a conflict, but it's more accurate in most of our opinions to look at us in terms of self-emancipated people.
How's it going, you guys?
I'm sorry? Oh, probably not towards me. And so again, my framework is really looking at what happens when people are forced to leave where they have set up a home, and then they travel someplace else and they basically set up new roots. And the reason I like to frame it that way is because I often think that I shouldn't be here. Like, our story is incredible. And I think that's what draws so many people to us, because it's this amazing story of people who probably should have given up on numerous occasions and they chose not to. And so that isn't just a lesson for, Seminole Negroes and Black Seminoles. I think it's a message for a larger community about what happens when you actually stick together and stand together and are able to work through all kind of issues and conflicts. So that's what I'm hoping we will do ourselves as descendants, and also as people's ancestors. Eventually in a couple of years, or maybe a dozen or 100 years, people are going to be looking back at us as their ancestors and asking, what were our lives like? What did we actually do? So enough of that. Again, because I can't see y'all, I'll probably need you to respond in the chat box. How many of you consider yourselves to be historians? You all's gonna mute yourself if that helps. Okay. All right. Let's see. All right. I would say if any of you are doing research on your families, and you're gathering information, you're looking at birth records, you're doing oral history, thank you, Astrid and Gabrielle. I would actually say that all of us are historians, family historians. And I think that people can say, well, I'm kind of a historian, or I want to be a genealogist, and they get confused with the titles. Don't get confused with the titles. If you are doing research on your families and you're collecting the documents and the narratives that go with it, then I would actually say that you're a historian. In the same way that some people consider themselves to be public researchers, I think that that's what all of us are as well. And an important part of us as historians is to make sure that we're actually documenting what we find. So part of what I'm going to do is run you through how I do research, and then how I've been learning from other people. So I see Anton Hawkins. Is that you online? I think it is. I've never met Anton Hawkins in real life. I've only met him online a couple of times. And when he and I spoke on a Zoom line, I believe Wendy was there as well, we made an agreement. And our agreement was that we would document our sources. We would let each other know if we found any kind of cross references, and we would just basically keep in touch. When I began doing research on my great-grandfather, I just happened to do a search for Hawkins because I thought, why not? And I ended up finding information about, I believe might have been one of Anton Hawkins' relatives, who turns out to have fought in the Spanish-American War in Cuba. And again, it's something I've shared with Anton, and he himself will then evaluate whether or not this actually is one of his kinfolk. But I want to show you what I did to get that information. I have it handy.
I need to share the screen with you. Hold on.
That's okay because I can't really find it immediately,
Hold
so
on.
it's good.
Okay, so I need to make you the host. Oh, no.
Okay. Well, let me describe to you what it is that I did. So I found records. Let me see. So I found, right, am I able to grab it? That's okay. So here's what it is. I found military records from my grandfather, and I thought my great-grandfather, and I thought he started his career as a scout. When I looked at his military records, what I found out is that he actually served in the 10th Cavalry, the regular army, in 1899. And it said he was in Cuba, which I thought was very strange. So I went and I looked it up, and there, in between 1899 and 1902, the United States was in a conflict, and a lot of the fighting took place in Cuba, and I can't remember if it's Puerto Rico or not. And so I was just curious about why would he actually have been there, and how did I not know that he was in the regular army first? Oh, sorry. So now you just switched to me. And what I thought was really amazing is the fact that I realized, well, if John Jefferson was in the regular army in 1899 and he came from Brackett and he wasn't a scout, there probably are other people who had the exact same experience. And so just on a lark, I decided to look up Hawkins. And so tell me if you can see my screen or not. Wendy, are you able to see my screen? Okay, Wendy, you're muted. Let me see.
Not yet, but it might take it a little while to come up.
I think I'm here. Okay, can you all see my screen now?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
So the first
Yeah, we
thing
can see it.
thanks. So the first thing I did is I wanted to see if I could do the same search for Hawkins that I did for myself. So I put in the word name Hawkins. James popped up as well. I knew that he had to have lived in Brackett at some point in time. And then I went down here, and again, this is all on ancestry.com. And just in case you don't know, most libraries, I guess, for a while are actually letting people use Ancestry for free, which is great. So I knew that the war was in 1899. I knew he had been in Brackett, and I took a guess and thought he would be in the 9th or 10th Cavalry. I did the search, and see, what I found was this listing. And it has a number of different Hawkins that are involved. But then I found the James Hawkins from Fort Clark, and it turned out he was indeed a U.S. Buffalo soldier. So from there, I'm like, okay, this is great. I'm making really great headway. I clicked on the link, and I found this. So with Ancestry, on your right-hand side, it's going to give you all the details that you might not be able to read in the original document. And so again, we can actually see where Anton Hawkins was. We can also have the archive publication date, number. So if you wanted to go back and look in this publication for folks who are coming back in the cavalry, that gives you the location number. So then the final thing I got to see was the actual document itself. And again, this is pretty blurry. So if you actually looked at this on your own, you'd be able to zoom in more and actually locate the name of James Hawkins. So it was pretty easy to start off. I did not do this work for any other family, only because I had said to Anton that I would do it for him. Anton, were you able to look at any of this, and did you find out if this is a match for anybody or not?
Yeah, I had to look kind of far back, but I think that he might be my great grandfather's brother.
Wow.
Because they had like 11 kids, and I know that I seen James on there. And I just recently got the chance to fish through my father's obituaries, and I know for sure I seen him in there.
Oh, that's
So
great.
yeah, I mean I know for sure because names like that, they stick out because they had a lot of different types of names, and so yeah, I was like, hey, that's probably him because there's not a lot of James Hawkins,
That's
um,
amazing.
yeah,
So, and this kind
and
of goes
and the time fits too.
absolutely. So this is an example of what I'm talking about as well, which is if you can make connections with other descendants as you're doing your research, you might come up with clues that help somebody else, fill out their family story as well. I will go back to sharing. Possibly. So I'm sorry, folks, I'm making my way through. The other thing that I found to be interesting is old documents. So now I've switched from looking at the military document, and I wanted to look at some other family artifacts. So some of you may or may not know that some soldiers had something called a soldier's handbook, and they had their soldier's handbook and used it as if they were using a family Bible. And I think my screens are getting mixed up, Wendy. So can you tell me what you see on your screen?
Right now, I don't see anything.
Okay.
Yeah, there's not anything being shared.
Okay. So again, this is all the magic of technology. I may or may not be able to pull this off as smoothly as I had hoped. So it's still blank.
It is, but sometimes it takes a little while. There, something's coming up now. There.
Perfect. And I'm going to post these all online so that you will have a smooth experience. I know that a lot of folks have family Bibles and records all their family information on it. And when my great aunt Cora gave me something last Seminole Days, it included this thing called the Soldier's Handbook. And it's a very interesting book about why you shouldn't go AWOL, how not to get gangrene, how to do the correct kind of push-ups, which I find to be very, very useful. What was more useful was written inside. So John Jefferson actually kept notes in his soldier's handbook. And so here you can see this was his second wife, Tina Jefferson. So he recorded her birth and her death date. He also had a last will and he also had a last will and testament. So he was in his first wife. Her name was Luella Givens.
I can't hear you, Betty.
Can you all see this?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Her name was Luella
Yes.
Givens, and so obviously while he was in the military, everything he had would actually go to her. What's really important though is that he notes when Luella died. Just as importantly, they had a daughter, and her name was also Luella Jefferson. And if you've ever gone to the Seminole Indian Scout Cemetery, there is this very big, beautiful headstone for Luella Givens. And for a while, it wasn't really clear who she was. She was his first wife, and she died in childbirth. And she'd given birth to a girl, and her name was Luella Jefferson as well. And I knew that Luella existed, but I could never find her. And it turns out she was born between the census. So Luella Jefferson, the daughter, was born in 1887 and she died in 1907, which is why she was hard to track because she was living with different people at different times. But luckily in this book, he actually records her birth and his death date. What you also see is after his first wife died, he then basically appointed one of his daughters to be his executor. Additionally, he went on to record the births of some of his other children as well. And finally, he also recorded his third wife is here as well. Her name is Bessie Sora. So that's a lot to dump on people, I realize, but my main point was that there is a trove of information that you probably have at your hands that you don't actually recognize yet. Does anybody else want to share like how they are doing their own research and what they're looking for or what they can't find?
Can you hear me, Sarah?
Yes.
Oh, I've been trying to find information about World War II soldiers, and I'm having a little problems. I did find a bit of information, but it still seems to be kind of hit and miss.
Where are you looking?
Well, I started out in Ancestry, then I did another search, family search or whatever, and then I've gone through all sorts of stuff, and then I got into I found some information online listed under World War II vets, like I think it was, and I came up with some information. But there are some things that that I've learned verbally, and I wanted to check out if it was true. For instance, I heard that at the end of World War II, when some soldiers were coming back from Europe, there was a ship that was involved in a bombing, and there were soldiers that were injured, wet in the water. And my understanding was that what's her name? Choja's husband was involved in an accident like that. And I believe that my father was also, but I wasn't able to find the name of the ship in order to see if there was anything documented.
So, Vini, are you able to unmute yourself, Lavinia Raspberry?
Yes, ma'am. Hi, everyone. I don't know the name of that ship either, and I'm sure would like to know it. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I hear you.
Yes, Cousin Tookie, I don't know the name of that ship.
Okay.
But you've
Well,
heard.
I'm still looking.
Okay.
But you've heard but Vini, you at least have heard the story.
Oh yes, my dad lost his voice on the he was on top of that ship, on deck when he went down below. And when he went down below, that's when they bombed it. And when he came back up, they, it was soldiers that were, murdered there.
Yeah, suppose that they were exposed to the oil from the ship, and that caused a lot of injuries.
And one of the things that we're seeing here now that I really enjoy is the fact that I know that Louise Thompson and Lavinia Raspberry know each other, but what we also heard too was actually having them be able to share the connection of what happened in World War II on that particular ship. And so if one of you happened to also, have a relative that was on a ship or had a similar situation, you will have now met two different women who are sharing some of the same story with you as well. And so that's one of our benefits of oral history and talking to other descendants. It's one of the ways that we're able to piece together some of these stories. So thank you, Louise and Lavinia. These two women also raise another, I think it's a funny point, but it's very confusing. I call both of these women my cousin, but they're not actually technically my cousins. I call people who are like my fifth cousins, I also call cousins as well. I find that very great and endearing. People find it very confusing. So Astria Johnson is actually she is an actual niece of mine. But I also have other people who I will refer to my niece who have no connection. So example, I have two uncles who are surviving, and their names are Uncle Herman and Uncle Toddy. And I had another uncle named Uncle Sonny. If you didn't know any better, you would think that at my age of 53, I know who I'm related to. It makes perfect sense. However, they're not actually my uncles. They're really my second or third cousins. I happen to have grown up calling them uncle. It's a term of affection as well as a term of respect. And so for a long time, my husband didn't realize that I don't have, 6 uncles. I really have 3 biological and 3 that I, inherited by, good luck and fortune. And so Lavinia Raspberry, I think you're my 3rd cousin or 4th cousin. And Louise Thompson, I call her cousin, but I don't think we have any blood relation at all. So just by the way that I refer to people as well, if you're doing some kind of a family record, you'd be looking for all of these aunts, uncles, and cousins who you won't find because I'm not actually related to them very closely. Another example is when Wendy introduced me and when Karina began speaking, they both referred to me as Nikki. And most people, depending on when I meet you, you're either Nikki or you're Sarah. If you were looking for me 20 years from now and you're looking for Nikki Johnson, you will never find me. And again, that is because I have a much more informal relationship with most people. And so again, tracking me back through my nickname, Nikki, would be very difficult. So for some of you who are researching some of your ancestors, you might be running into the same thing of where you might be looking for Uncle Sonny, but his name is actually Harry Warrior Jr. And so again, by talking to other descendants as well, I found it is very useful in figuring out like what are, what is someone's real name versus what we're actually calling them. And so as you were doing your research, one, if as a descendant of someone, if you know that they go by a nickname, sharing that information out with other descendants is really helpful. Because it'll help us kind of, get through one of the stumbling blocks like Anton referenced. And again, that's also where we need to do our own due diligence. Like if I'm going around calling myself Nikki all the time, I should hope that I write down Sarah, Nikki, so-and-so, so that someone in the future could find me if they needed to. Anton, do you want to comment more about what you wrote about the different names?
Yeah, that's been a really big stumbling block for me. Like throughout the whole search, people using like what you said, using their real name or using their or a fake name or like or just a native name, or just like if the person that come up and check the records is looking for like the parents, they'll say that their parents is mommy or daddy, and that's on like the official census record, and so where you would actually find the real name. I mean, like, and I guess that's where you got to cross-reference with family stories and oral history, because going straight off the record, you can't really do that. Just like what you were saying.
Right.
I have a question for Mr. Hawkins.
Go ahead, Vinny.
Mr. Hawkins, yes. Mr. Hawkins, have you ever heard that your Hawkins name was interchangeable with other last names? Did he hear me?
He's yeah. Anton, you're on mute.
Okay.
Yeah, they also went by Harjo as well. So they went by Hawkins and they went by Harjo.
Okay. Any other names you found?
Somebody and when I called the people and talked to them over in East Texas. They said it was, I forgot the name, but it started with a B. They mispronounced her name. So the person said Hawkins, but their accent was so thick that they thought they said like Blevins or something like that. And so on the record, on my grandfather's military record, they said that his mother's name was totally different than what it actually was. And when I called the genealogy people in East Texas, they told me that they already know it's been noted. So the other name is a false name, and it was on my great grandmother. And it's causing like that kind of stuff, like just with accents and things like that. It makes a lot of confusion as well.
Right.
All right, thank you for that.
Right. This leads to another illustrative point. If any of you looked at the scout records, you'll notice at the very end there is a scout whose name was Henry Warrior, but it's spelled Woryer. It's a weird pronunciation of it. The oral history part of it says that his name was Henry Thompson, and on his way from Kerrville to Brackett, he ended up killing two men, and he needed to flee. And so he went into Mexico and he came back using his mother's maiden name of Warrior. And obviously someone didn't write it down correctly because it came out as that weird spelling. Well, when I was looking up what happened to Henry Warrior, what I found is that after he got out of the military, he resumed his name as Henry Thompson. And so you can find all the records with Henry Thompson. And the way I confirmed this is because I know the names of his children. And so when you look at census records, you will indeed see that there is a Henry Thompson living with a Polly and a Leanna and others. But when he's buried and they use a military headstone, he goes back to being Henry Warrior. And so that's an example of knowing the oral history, also then looking at census data, and then looking at the military headstones to kind of figure out that this is indeed the same person. And so again, I just think that, you know, when you hear oral history, you can't take it completely as face value, but at least if you try to pick one fact or one detail or one event and start to pursue it, hopefully you will be able to find either other people who can confirm it. You will find some kind of a government document. It could be a census document. It could be a widow's pension. It could be a military pension. They're all different, forms of information that you can actually connect with. And again, talking to other descendants is really helpful. Again, because each of us have connections that we don't realize that are part of our whole story. So the other part I should mention is the Historical Society. So the Historical Society got started when I was introduced to work that was initially done by Kato Wittich, and I believe Wendy and Karina also helped with the initial work of transcribing these military records out of the archives.
Okay. Yes.
And so that to me was eye-opening, because I had always heard that the U.S. government basically abandoned the Scouts. So there was an agreement. So when the Scouts came back over to the States, there was the initial agreement that they would work, and then they would be sent back to Indian Territory. And this is something that all of us know. It's common lore, common knowledge. What I never knew was that there were military folks who were advocating on behalf of the Scouts. And so the more you read these military documents, you begin to see another side of the story, which was that there were the military commanders that worked with the Scouts at Fort Duncan and at Fort Clark knew that they were getting the raw end of the deal. And so you have this entire trove of letters that are between the commanders at Fort Clark and, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, the Department of the Interior. At some point, they try to, reconnect with the person who is a representative from Florida. They also talk to representatives who are in Oklahoma, and they keep reaching these stalemates. On the Historical Society website, and I'll show that to you at the very end, we started transcribing those documents and posting them online. So one, it's because we wanted to make sure that people saw the documents. Again, am I sharing my screen or now or not?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. One of the things we started to do with the Historical Society is to go back and start looking at these letters. And one thing we want,
You're not sharing.
I'm not sharing. Thank you. Am I sharing now?
I don't see it.
Okay.
iPhone and restore like iOS 13.1, the old phone, and you want to go into your settings, scroll all the way up until you see your Apple ID right there. Go ahead and tap on that. Then you want to go to iCloud. And if you get this pop up to agree to the new terms and conditions, of course, go ahead and do that and agree. And then you'll be able to go into your iCloud settings right here. Then you just want
So
to make
Wendy,
sure
I don't
that
know what's happening.
example is toggled on. This is basically everything you want to be backed up via iCloud and transferred over to your new phone. So
The host
messages,
can mute.
photos are probably the two most important. So make sure that's toggled on. Go into photos, make sure iCloud Photos is toggled on, and then set these settings right here. Now everybody has their own preference, so you can go ahead.
Well, it says on my screen, host disable participant screen sharing.
Okay, let's see.
Now you're back.
Now I'm back.
Mm-hmm.
Now can you see my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Now it's
Excellent.
coming up. It just takes a little while to come up.
We were making headlines. So on the Historical Society website, we wanted to provide primary documents. And one of the ways is looking at those military documents that I mentioned. So what we've done is you will actually see, give it a second. So this is the transcription of the original letter that was sent in regards to allowing the scouts to come over to the United States. What we then do is actually provide you with the actual letter itself so that you're able to read on your own what the letter actually said. And so the idea is that we will transcribe letters and post them so that one, it makes it much more accessible. Not everyone is going to want to spend their time reading old handwriting. It is difficult and it can be cumbersome. So what we want to do is to make sure that people have access to this information. So a big part of our work is to actually go through these letters and transcribe them and post them for people to use. And everything that's on the website for the Historical Society is free to use. So our hope is to basically gather enough information that people who want to do their own research on the community have primary documents that they can utilize rather than just having to go off of books or comments from other people as well. So I wanted to make sure you saw that. And I think we have about, I don't know, 8 letters or so that are posted. Additionally, we have also put together a booklet, and I'm going to stop sharing. We've also put together a booklet that allows you to go through and read more of the letters, and it has a narrative with it as well. So oftentimes when you can read some of these documents, you don't have the context for what's happening within them. So when you read about the fact that the scouts, an important part of the story, which I failed to mention, has to do with the community. A lot of times we focus in on the scouts and everything that they did. We don't focus on their families, which is unfortunate for us for a number of reasons. One, none of us would be here unless there was a community and some very strong women who went through a lot as they were sometimes left to make ends meet. There is a part of the time of where the military is giving limited rations to the scouts. And this limited number of rations is supposed to support an entire community. And again, in these military documents, it goes through and it documents how basically the deprivation that was happening on the reservation because there just weren't enough resources. So you take that in the context of the number of women and children who might have been at the fort at a time. So if they only took 30 scouts at a time for that 6-month period, and there are 200 people on the reservation, there are obviously issues there, right? It's an issue of scarcity and other things as well. So I think that looking at these military documents, it also tells you how many people were in any particular location. Oh, great. Now you guys can see what I do as a nervous habit. I obviously touch my hair. It'll tell you the number of people that are in any location at a time. It'll tell you their ages. It'll tell you the status of their health as determined by the military person who recorded it. And it's also important because as you begin tracing the scouts when they come back in 1870, it's an important way for you, one, to track who came over when, but also it's important in terms of tracking names. So for example, my great-great-grandmother's name was Phyllis Bruner. And when she goes into Mexico with a bunch of her kids, they're all named Bruners. When they come back, some of them are called Bruners and others are called Brunos. And since we all know that they're all the same kids that left the United States and they came back, that just shows that there was some kind of wrong transcription that happened when they came back into the United States as well. So that's another example of you know, making sure that you can find the right family name or something close enough so that you can work with other descendants to figure out, well, was it Bruno or Brunner? When did it change? What census did it change in? So if they were all Bruners in 1870 and then in 1890 they become something else, you can at least, you know, track with that 20-year period with the census and some of the military documents, what happened and why and possibly when. I could think one of the last things I wanted to focus in on, and then I will open it up for all open discussion, has to do with our community. You know, the past 3 years, I think have been very difficult for a lot of us because we have left, because we've lost a lot of our elders. It definitely was a very rough year. I think in the United States, the last of the group of the 27, so those are the kids who were born in 1927, there was, you know, Dub Warrior, there was Ethel Warrior, and then there was also, y'all, I
Mary
can't
Dixon
remember her
Hasso.
name, baby's name, Rodessa, right?
No, Mary Dixon Hasso.
Okay. See, this is somebody that I don't know. So look, this will be something good that I need to find out more about. I thought it was Rodessa. So that's, again, thank you for this, the feedback. I would not have known otherwise. But we have a new crop of elders, and I'm not going to call anybody out, but they know who they are. There's still another group of folks who were born and bred in Brackett and in Del Rio, who knew a lot of the, you know, original old heads. So there are people who knew some of the scouts or knew, you know, some of the scouts' children or some of their grandchildren as well. They're also the folks who were raised up by Miss Charles and Miss Dorothy, who were the teachers and principals at the Carver School. And as most of you know, the Carver School was segregated. Got right up into sometime in the late 50s, right? Because my mom graduated, I think, in 54. And these people are incredibly valuable to us because they have information that those of us in younger generations don't have. And if we don't know who to go talk to, we're going to be one more generation removed again from actually knowing more about our history and what things were like. So what were some of the old folks like once they came off of the reservation and they lived in Brackett? They had a heck of a time. So for example, one thing they used to do is there's a book that I have that just has names in it. And it just has Charles Daniel and it'll list his wife and all of his kids. And it seemed like a really weird thing to kind of track down. What I learned is that they were tracking people because it was such a small insular community that they wanted to make sure that people weren't involved with their relatives, which sounds odd, but when you think more about like how small of a community we actually were, because even when people intermarried, when we were over in Nacimientos, it's still a pretty insular kind of group. And so there's a ledger that was kept. And I think I've shared part of it online, but I will do it again because my mother's cousin, her name was Ellen Huffpower. She was also the secretary of CISCA back in the 50s. And she was one of the people who kept this ledger. So you can compare the handwriting and see that it's the same person. So it's interesting that they began their own record keeping. They did it for a very good reason. But for us, it's a big benefit because we can see at that time who they recorded as being related to who. It's also important because not everybody had the same mother and father, but you would have been raised up most likely by your mother as well. And so there are also clues within those books about, how people were actually related. So somebody could be named Jones, but their father might have been a Patrick. And so there are also ways of making sure people knew who the parents were. And so again, that's another way of ensuring your bloodlines. So they're all funny little quirks with the Seminole folk who lived down in the Brackett Way. And I think it's exciting. And I know I did a lot more talking than I thought I would do. I get very enthusiastic about this topic, as you might guess. But again, I think it just brings it back to we have to do our own research. Like if we don't do the work, who's going to do it? If we don't do the work, then we're going to be known as, I don't know, Seminole Indian Negro Scouts because it's catchy, right? SINS, very exciting title of a pilot that may or may not come out. That's not who we are or what we have been called. We are definitely the Seminole Negro Indian Scouts. If we can't start keeping our narrative straight, and if we can't keep sharing the facts that we know, at some point people are going to define us, and at some point people are going to make us much more of a myth than an actual community that has survived great odds. And I think that's our responsibility. I mean, there's if we don't do it, no one else will. And it's going to be very difficult for us to look back in a couple of years and say, but that's not really what happened. That's not what I know to have happened. Because by then we will not have done the research or captured the information we need to actually push back on these false narratives. So with that, I am going to start talking. And it'd be great to hear what some of you all are doing for your research. How are you connecting with other descendants? How are you documenting what you do? Because I think, again, Wendy just shared information with me about someone I was not aware of. So floor is open for anyone who'd like to talk and share.
And everyone is welcome to ask questions. You can just unmute yourself and ask the question, or you can put it in the chat if you'd like, and we can just read it.
I actually have a question. It's Karina. So the last time that we spoke, Nikki, we found out that our grandmothers were sisters, and that was Sarah Factor.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know that my grandmother Amelia Factor had. I mean, I knew that was her sister, but I didn't know, that you were related to her. Do you know of any other sisters?
I don't know of any. I don't know of any of the sisters. I have not gone back that far with the factors because I started to focus much more on the Daniels. So I don't know, but that's something I'd be interested in finding out.
Okay. And Susie, have you found anything?
Not lately.
No. Okay.
I'd like to ask you a question, Orina.
Yes.
Sarah Factor, do you have her husband's name?
Her husband, was it Charles Daniels? He was a Daniels.
It was Charles, yeah.
Okay. So Yeah, that's what I have, that her husband was a Charles Daniels.
Okay. There I probably have to talk to you, one-on-one or whatever, because there are two in the obituaries, there are two Sarahs. There's Sarah Daniels, and then there's a Sarah Factor. And I don't have my papers in front of me, but there's one Sarah that was married to Charles. Her maiden name was Kelly. And then there's that Sarah who was a Factor. So have you seen any death certificates or anything on those two women?
Well,
Some of
the
them,
only, yeah, somebody's TV's on or something. So I do have some documents on Sarah Factor, because she was Amelia Factor's sister. So I've been trying to find to see who else is related, if they had any more sisters or brothers.
Okay.
I
Go ahead.
just don't know exactly what I have right now.
Okay. Okay. Well, I can't remember exactly. I have to pull my papers out because I'm a little confused about the two Sarahs. And what they're, one of them I know, and the other I'm not quite sure of, but I can pull those papers out so that and get them to you so you can look at it, if that would help.
Okay, and so the Sarah that I was talking about was, I think she was the first Black Seminole born in Coahuila. So
yes.
that's the one that I was looking for information on.
Okay. Well, the one that I knew was that lady that was married to Charles. Just his last name was Charles Daniel.
Yeah.
Her family in Nebraska was the Watsons. And Della Watson's mother, Della Watson's mother, she was Della Watson's mother's mother.
Yeah, so I'd be interested in looking more into that as well, because Tookie, I know the same. So I have always followed the same line that Karina is following as well, with that Sarah Patrick Daniels. Can you guys see my screen? My favorite question.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah.
Okay. So most of you guys have seen this picture. It's well known. This is of Charles Daniel. This is his wife, Mariana. And this is his daughter. Sometimes her name is Tina. Sometimes it's Tenna. I learned from Wendy. This is actually his second wife and his second daughter, Tina.
We're not seeing your screen. You're not showing any. It's not here.
Oh, that's in four. Okay.
Yeah.
This is going to be worse than like your mic's on. Okay. Can you see this?
Yes. Yes, we see that.
Yes.
Charles Daniel was married twice, once in Mexico and once in the United States. So this is Tina Daniels, which is his older daughter. And Tina Daniels is Sarah Patrick Daniels' daughter. And she is my great-great-grandmother. And I know, not so exciting to see someone else's great-grandmother, but it's interesting when I show you her sister. So this is the photograph that most people have seen when they look up the Scouts. So this is Charles Daniel as an older man, much older. This is Mariana's wife. and this is Tina or Tina Daniels. And so again, having us all talk together is very helpful because I don't think a lot of people realize that there are two Tina Daniels and that they're half sisters, and that is not the same person. And so one is she is the sister-in-law of John Jefferson, and this is his wife. So again,
Right.
sharing that just to show in terms of like, the more we talk, the better off we are, because there's a lot of this kind of stuff going in and out.
Well,
So
the one that Antina or Antini, we used to call her, that was George Jefferson's wife. She was her last name was Daniels, related to Jerry Daniels and my great grandmother. The lady, the lady, the lady that Dina is talking about, my memory is to recall it right now, but I could give her a little bit of information about the lady that I said related to the Watson.
that would be great.
I knew that answer. Yeah, I knew her. I could give her a little bit of history.
That's perfect.
Is that on Amelia?
Because it's
Was that
taken
Amelia,
me.
her grandmother, you said?
Yes, Amelia Factor. She in Mexico, her name was Gertrudis Gonzalez.
Okay.
But see, but there was a Sarah Daniels and a Sarah Factor, and I believe it. I don't believe that they're the same people.
So this will be something that we can look into more. I mean, I'd be interested in helping delve into this more as well.
Yeah,
On doing the research, you have to watch out for double names.
Right.
There's a lot of duplicate names.
Because-
There's like 3 or 4 Mary Warriors, like for instance, and a couple of Phyllis Jefferson and Sarah Factor. Sounds like that would be duplicated too.
Yeah,
Or
because
Sarah.
there's two different parents on the death certificate, and the Sarah that was married to Charles Daniels. Charles Daniels was my great grandmother's, I think it was her brother-in-law.
Well, this would be good to follow up with you guys offline as well, because I think.
Yeah, I'm getting confused.
But thank you. That has been very helpful.
But I can send her some papers so that she can research with those people. Okay, Jerry Daniels, Charles Daniels, and Sarah Daniels.
And I think that doing this work, we found that out very quickly with the names, the triple, quadruple people being named. So that's why it's so much harder for us, because we have to look deeper and for different dates and parents. But I mean, we do know that, it makes it a little bit harder for us, but we found that very quickly, that how the names were repeated.
Yeah.
Right. And
Well,
again,
I had been trying to find out my great grandmother's. I knew that her mother's name was Nancy Kelly, and I knew that she was related to Sarah Daniels, but I didn't know exactly how. We always call the lady Aunt Sarah. And I think now I finally found that connection. And it's a good thing when you solve those mysteries.
So I have to say as well, and I wrote it in the chat as well, this is exactly the kind of conversation and work that I hope that we would be able to do as descendants, and also, with the help of outside researchers and allies as well, because the amount of information we actually have the ability to share amongst ourselves to help each other figure out where our tree lines go, it's invaluable, and no one else can do this kind of work except for us. So I'm beating the drum to death at this point in time, but the more work we can do together as a community, the stronger our story is, and the stronger we have the facts to actually back up a lot of what we say, which is invaluable. Does anyone else have any kind of parting thoughts? Because it's 9:08 and I don't want to take up too much of people's time. But I would have one last request of you. So does anyone else have anything they'd like to share or questions they'd like to ask?
Sarah, I would like to thank you. This is Chauncey Spencer.
Hi.
For inviting me to your function in Benny McRae, and just share a little bit about who I am. So my grandmother is Ann Spencer. She's a poet of the Harlem Renaissance, and her father was an African-American slave and a Seminole Indian. And so my father, Chauncey Spencer Sr., was a Tuskegee Airman, and he was the Tuskegee Airman that met with Senator Truman to open the doors for Blacks to get into the Army Air Corps that we know as the Tuskegee Airmen. So I'm his son, and I travel all over the country, and Sarah and myself are going to be working on a project to create an archive that Benny has already created, and Hampton University dropped the ball. So we'll be working together. So I get to see Sarah, and I get to see the whole group. We are all related, as my father has on his headstone. We are all one. We are all God's children. So we are all one, but because we're Seminoles and we're Black Seminoles, we're definitely all one. And we're strong people. We were the only people of the 5 civilized tribes that were never put in the Indian reservation and never signed a peace treaty with the white man. That's what the Seminole Indians, and that's why we are the strongest. When they had the Trail of the Tears, they couldn't take the Seminole Indians. They sent Captain Lee, later General Lee, down to Florida to gather them and infected the blankets with smallpox to kill the Indians on the trail to Oklahoma. So I'll leave it like that. I am an historian for real. I've traveled in the last 4.5 years. I've traveled a little more than 52,000 miles. I've educated a little more than 135,000 kids across the United States. And I've touched on 42 states, 47 major cities in the last 4 years. I'm in Houston, Texas now, getting ready to put on a Black College Expo at the NRG Stadium where the Houston Rockets play at on Saturday. And we're expecting 30,000 kids that we're going to introduce to the HBCUs. So I want to thank everybody for what they're doing. It is very important. What Sarah's telling you is right. Only people that can record and record your history is you. Nobody else can do that, because if not, it'll turn from history to his story. It'll turn into a fiction or a novel. So history is what it is, whether it's good, bad, or indifferent. And that's what history is. And that's what America has dropped the ball. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing, because our young people are being misled. They're cleaning up the history. You can't clean up history. History is what it is. In order for us to have a plateau to follow, we have to remember the past and the mistakes that we've made in our culture. If not, if we clean them up, they'll constantly come back and bite us. And on that, before I start preaching to you and pass the basket around, I'm going to say good night to everybody. God bless you, and may God be with you all the time. Thank you.
Thank you. Any last thoughts? And then I'm going to share my closing thoughts and request to everybody.
Can I ask one question? On Adina, is she related to the young lady, the last name's Arredondo? Is Dina gone?
Oh, Karina?
Karina. Are you
Yes, I am. We're cousins. We're first cousins.
What's her first name?
Her first name, Dina.
Uh-huh.
Her first name is Dina.
Now, and okay. Well, I'll let it go. I'll ask you later. 'Cause I
Okay.
was trying to find a connection, but I'll ask you later when I contact you. Okay.
Perfect.
I have a question
You're
for
both beautiful women.
Karina. Sarah,
Yes, I
I
can.
have a question for Karina.
Who's
Yes.
this?
Susie,
Hi. Okay. Hi, Susie.
I was wondering if anybody did any research in the courthouse of Brackettville. How good are their records?
They're not that good.
Yeah, they said that they had a fire back in the 50s that destroyed a lot of records. The people there are very helpful. I will say that they are incredibly helpful, but you just kind of have to know what you're looking for. And
Mhm.
Kato just joined. Hey, Kato. But yeah, case in point,
So-
at one point we were looking for Mr. Warrior's high school diploma because it wasn't at the high school anymore. I don't know if they were storing, old diplomas at the courthouse, and they had no idea about it.
So
But I think
how about their probate records?
I am not sure. I haven't ever looked up anything in probate. Mostly I've looked up like land
Right.
and census. But what I will say is that everybody in Brackett they're all very kind and very helpful.
Good.
You just have to have a very clear idea of what you're looking for. They might not know exactly, but if you're very clear about what you're looking for, they will definitely get you as close to where you need to be to find it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So I have one more question. After a widow collects a pension, when she is deceased, does the pension stop there or does another descendant get it?
Do you know that, Nikki?
I don't believe so. I have pension papers from my great aunt, but I
That's
don't think
the-
that those.
that-
I don't know if they
that's the-
transfer or not.
That's the end of the pension. Once
That is
that
it.
person is, that's the end of the pension.
Okay. So if they're not at Fort Clark, would they be at the National Archives?
Mm.
Well, it wouldn't be at Fort Clark.
Well, they don't have any information there for sure.
No.
Did
No,
you speak with someone named Russell Noel?
not at-
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh,
It's a very evasive situation.
So Susan, I can send you copies
You know-
of the widow's pension form that were given out for widows of the Scouts.
Uh-huh.
And I actually have one that's filled out. So that might actually help you figure out where some of these records might
Because I have
reside.
some good dates, so I can really pinpoint.
Okay. So
But I'll tell you, there's two other good sources that I use in my genealogy, and that's the two best I get are obituaries and phone books.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
I mean, when you're doing a family, if they've got 12 kids, you got a lot of homework to do
Yeah.
because you got to do all the 12 kids to find out you've got the right person. But if you can get a hold of an old phone book record, there's a lot of good information in those phone books.
Yeah, that's very true.
Unfortunately, most people in Brackett didn't have telephones. I lived there until I was still 63,
Mhm.
and there were very few people with telephones.
Yeah, I've heard stories of people going to neighbors to borrow their phones and stuff like that. So if someone had, everybody shared their resources. So if someone had a phone,
You have
you
to
would go
go
borrow that person's
go
phone.
to we had to go we had to go to Joe Gossett and use a phone.
It's funny.
Mhm.
All right,
So-
folks. So here is where I think we will leave off. I have 3 requests and I put them in the chat. So one is obviously start doing the work. You've all been doing the work. If you hadn't been doing the work, you wouldn't have come to this Zoom call. This isn't for people who are just nothing else to do on a Wednesday night. And also making sure that you're documenting your work. So if you're doing oral history, you're looking at other primary sources. If you just kind of, jot down and take note of where you're finding this information, that would be great. Also, I think you can all see this chat after the call is done. Look at the last names, or if you want to, before the chat ends, put in some of the surnames that you're looking for, because the odds are, if I'm doing research and I come across the last name of Holly, I'll know to look and see when I'm doing other research, do I come across that name as well? Because we should really start, sharing information. My sister calls it crowdsourcing. And you will have seen this in action on the Historical Society's Facebook page. Initially started out as something that was just going to be about the Scouts, but if you go through the Facebook page, you'll see it's more about community. We've had several people connect with relatives that they didn't know they even had. And again, that's because you had all these people sharing information and making these different connections. And so if you are able and willing to share that kind of information, that would be great. And starting, I think, this Friday, once a month, I'm having like a small group discussion. So for those of us who want to dig more into some research about our own backgrounds or to share information, I think it'll be an opportunity just to do a deeper dive. And I have one more thing I want to share, if that's okay. Most of you all, I'm sure, are aware of, or who John Jefferson is. You see his picture in many places. But I wanted to share, again, I'm going to ask, can you see my screen?
Yes.
You can. Okay, great.
Yes.
We're making progress this
Hello.
time.
Not yet. Not yet.
Let's see.
There you go.
Okay. So most of us know this guy, right? This is the picture that everybody sees.
It still hasn't come up yet. It just takes a minute to. I've heard that whenever you're on Zoom, your internet connection is a lot slower. So
Ironic, isn't it? That is called
I
Zoom.
know. I know.
Yeah.
Am I up yet?
Oh, we got Rena.
Nope. Is that a yes?
No, not yet.
No.
I'll try it again, because this was kind of the exciting part. I was like, oh, this will be great. All right.
Good picture of Karina.
All right, that's good. You know what? That's progress. And I love seeing her, so that it's all the better. Okay. Can you now see my screen?
Yeah, we can see you.
Oh my goodness. Okay, Wendy, my heart is broken. What I wanted to show you all is I always talk about sharing information and sharing resources. And I wanted to share with you all a picture that you might find interesting, but I can't figure it out.
Keep trying it, because it takes a little minute to connect.
Well, I will tell you the background of why I want to share it with you. And then you, let's see, this might be it. We got it? Excellent. So this is the John Jefferson that I think we all know, we all recognize. But I wanted to share with you a couple of other John Jeffersons. So this was in one of my mother's collection boxes. So this is John Jefferson with his wife Luella, who I talked about earlier. This is John Jefferson when he was no longer in the military. So this is in 1944. And the sassy child next to him is my mother. The next picture. Yeah. So if you all those knees and those suede shoes. So if you all read the Porter book, there is a part in the book where there are these older women. I think Rosa Faye is one of them. And someone says, if you want to know what John Horst looked like, look at John Jefferson. And that always struck me as such a weird thing, because to me, this is John Jefferson. Well, when I got this picture, I changed my mind. So this is John Jefferson, and I think this was in 1953, and I think he dies, I think it's 54, 55. And so I wanted to share that because I think it's important for us to realize that, yes, that youthful John Jefferson that is so well known is great, but it was interesting to see, the John Jefferson who was in Cuba, and also see the John Jefferson as an old man. So I'm not saying that this is what John Horst looked like or anything like that. I'm simply saying I don't think most people have ever seen a picture of John Jefferson, as you know, as an older man. And I think it's an interesting thing to see, so that we're not just stuck with this image. And again, this is by going through drawers and looking at stuff as well. So any old pictures that you all have, photograph them, save them, share them if you can. Again, because you never know how it could hook up with somebody else. So
That picture of John Jefferson, I could recognize that that's the old John Jefferson.
yeah. I mean, it's pretty crazy. I mean, even looking at this one, and as I told you, when they were in the Spanish-American War, his rank was trumpeter of the 10th Cavalry Company D. And so again, this picture, I'd seen it before, but it didn't make any sense to me until I found his military record. So with that, I am not going to keep going on and on. I'm sorry. So I think I have shared and overshared and shared more and more and more. I do hope that we all stay in contact. Please, we can reach each other through the Facebook page. You can also, there are a number of chats that are going on the Facebook page as well. So again, I'm going to keep putting up more ways that people can do the research and share it. But my biggest hope is just that we keep doing the work and recording our work and figuring out how we want to like save that work. So I'm really grateful that you guys all came on a Wednesday evening. I hope it was informative. I know I dumped a lot of information, and but I hope if nothing else, you will leave with the same enthusiasm that I have about it, because this is our work and our time to do it and record it. And I think it's exciting that there's so many of us to do that work. So with that, I bid
Thank
you
you.
a good evening.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, Nikki. Thank you. It was very informative. Yeah.
Thank you, Nikki. Thank you, Wendy.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. I'll see you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
I'm
Bye, everybody.
calling you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Let's see.
Bye, Benny.
Bye. Goodbye.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Bye, Kato.